my friend Ellie wouldn't stop tapping his flashlight like it was a drumstick. It made the beam stutter across the weeds and the busted chain-link fence, like the place was flickering in and out of existence. "Dude," I said, keeping my voice low even though nobody was around. "You're gonna kill the battery before we even get inside." Ellie grinned at me over his shoulder. He had that look he always got when he thought he was about to be the first person to discover something, and not the "I found $20 in a jacket pocket" kind of discovery. The other kind. The dumb kind. "I brought spares," he said, and patted his cargo pocket. "Relax." I wasn't relaxed. My skin had been buzzing since we turned off the main road and took the gravel service lane that didn't show up on maps anymore. The trees were too close. The air smelled like wet metal. And the building ahead, half collapsed, windows punched out, roof line sagging, looked less like abandoned and more like left behind in a hurry. It used to be a county property office. That's what Ellie said. Some kind of admin building, back when the lake area had more staff, more tourists, more money. Then, there were the disappearances. Not one. Not a local tragedy people talk about for a week. More like a slow leak. A kid who didn't come home. A hiker whose truck sat at a trailhead for 3 days. A maintenance guy who walked in for a shift and never walked back out. Stuff people argued about online. Stuff adults shrugged off with, "They probably ran away," or "They probably got lost." Ellie didn't shrug. He collected it. He had a folder on his phone called Skinned Man, like it was a school project. "You're really doing the Skinned Man thing right now?" I said, and tried to sound like I thought it was stupid. Ellie's grin widened. "You say it like it's not the coolest thing in the world." "It's not," I said. "It's a creepypasta." "It's not a creepypasta," he shot back, immediate. Like he'd been waiting for me to say that. "People have actually gone missing. You've seen the posters. You've seen the candle vigil posts. That's not made up." I glanced at the gate. Someone had zip-tied a strip of cardboard to the fence. The marker was washed out by rain, but you could still read it. "Keep out. Unsafe structure." Underneath that, someone had written, in a different hand, "He's in there." Ellie shined his flashlight across it like he was reading an exhibit label. "There," he said, triumphant. "See? Even locals know." "Or locals want teenagers to stop trespassing," I said. Ellie moved closer to the gate and lifted the chain, where it had been cut and tied off. "We're not going deep. We go in, we get some footage, we leave. That's it." He said footage like this was a documentary, and not two idiots with cheap flashlights and a phone on 10%. I hesitated. I could have turned around right then. I could have told him to screw off and gone home, played games and pretended the world was normal. But I'd already followed him here. And the thing about Ellie was, if you backed out, he'd do it anyway. Alone. He'd go in, he'd get hurt, and then I'd live with that. So I stepped over the cut chain and followed him through. The weeds were taller on the inside, like the lot had been growing wild for a decade. Broken glass crunched under our shoes. A metal sign that probably used to have the county seal on it lay face down in the dirt. Ellie pointed his flashlight at the front doors. The glass was gone. The double doors hung open like a mouth. Inside was dark. Even with our lights, it felt dark. You know how some places feel like they still have air moving through them? Like they're just empty buildings? This didn't. This felt packed. Like the darkness was a thing in there, waiting to be disturbed. Last chance, I muttered. Ellie looked back. You're already here. And then he stepped inside like it was a dare. The lobby smelled like mildew and old paper. The ceiling tiles were missing in places, exposing metal ribs and dangling wires. A receptionist desk sat flipped on its side like someone had shoved it over in anger. Ellie moved slow, flashlight beam scanning the floor. Watch your step, he said, and his voice had that weird, excited calm, like he was trying to prove he wasn't scared. We walked past a hallway with doors on both sides. Some were open, most were shut. The building made small noises, settling creeps, a distant drip, stuff that should have been normal. But every time something creaked, Ellie flinched. He tried to hide it, but I saw. Okay, I said quietly. Explain the skin band thing again? Because you never do it straight. Ellie pulled up his phone, screen dim, and pulled up a saved post. Old accounts say he used to work maintenance here, he said. Like, back when it was staffed. And then he disappeared. And then people started going missing around the area. And some hikers supposedly found... He swallowed, and the beam on his flashlight jittered. Found a deer, with the skin peeled off like a jacket. Ellie... I'm just saying what the thread said. Threads say aliens built the pyramids, I said. Ellie shot me a look. This is different. Because it scares you. Because it's real, he insisted. We passed an office with a busted window. Moonlight fell in a pale rectangle across the floor. Dust hung in the beam like floating ash. And then I saw it. A face. Not a person. Not a full body. Just a face shape in the darkness of the room. Pale against the back wall. Like someone standing still, watching us through a doorway. My whole body went cold. I stopped so hard, Ellie bumped into me. What? Shh, I hissed, and nodded toward the room. Ellie followed my gaze. His flashlight swept across. The face vanished. Not like it moved. Like it was never there. Just a peeled patch of wallpaper, lighter than the rest, curling at the edges like a thin flap. Ellie exhaled in a shaky laugh that wasn't funny. Dude, you're jumpy. I saw something, I said. You saw wallpaper. I didn't argue. I just kept moving. Because standing still in that hallway felt wrong. Like the building wanted us to pause. We took a left, deeper into the place. Ellie kept filming little clips, whispering commentary like he was hosting a ghost show. Room 1. Old offices, ceiling collapse. Super creepy. I wanted to tell him to shut up, but the sound of his voice was the only thing keeping the silence from swallowing us. That's what I told myself, anyway. We passed a stairwell blocked by fallen drywall and twisted railings. The lower floor was half flooded, black water reflecting our lights in quick flashes. Basement's a no, I said. Ellie nodded too fast. Yeah, no. Not trying to die. We kept going until we found a small office with intact walls, and a door that still swung on its hinges. It had an old corkboard on one wall, and a metal filing cabinet rusted at the corners. The window was cracked, but not fully broken. It felt like a pocket of normal. Ellie shut the door behind us and leaned back against it with a dramatic sigh. "Okay," he said. "Break." I slid my backpack off and pulled out 2 water bottles. My hands were shaking a little, and that annoyed me. "You good?" Ellie asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," I lied. "Just, this place sucks." He took the bottle and twisted the cap. "This place rules." I stared at him. "You're insane." Ellie smiled, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Okay, listen," he said, voice dropping like he was about to confess something. "I didn't just want to see if it was true. Here it comes." He glanced down at his phone, the screen reflecting in his eyes. "My cousin's friend disappeared last fall," he said, "near the lake trail. Everybody acted like it was normal. Like, oh, people go missing sometimes. But they didn't find anything. Not even a backpack." I didn't say anything. Ellie kept going anyway, like he'd been holding it in. "I found these posts," he said. "People saying the same thing happened years ago. Same area. Same... nothing. And then someone mentioned this building. Like it's connected. Like this is where it started." I swallowed. "Ellie, you know that's how rumors work." "Then why are there clothes everywhere?" he shot back. "Why is that a thing multiple people report? Clothes. Left behind. Like someone... like something... just..." He made a grabbing motion. "Takes them." I opened my mouth to tell him to stop, because my brain didn't want the picture. That's when Ellie went quiet mid-sentence. His face changed. Not fear, exactly. Confusion first. Like he suddenly didn't understand what he was seeing. "What?" I asked, and followed his gaze down toward the floor behind the desk. My flashlight beam dropped, and my stomach dropped with it. There was blood. Not a little smear. Not a someone cut their hand years ago stain. Dark, wet-looking patches on the carpet, tacky at the edges, a trail leading behind the desk. And, slumped in the corner, half in shadow, half in our light, a body. At first, my brain tried to make it something else. A mannequin, a pile of dirty clothes. Then the shape resolved. Human. Arms, legs, head tilted wrong. And the worst part wasn't that it was dead. It was that it was peeled. Like someone had taken a person and removed the outside like it was an outfit. There wasn't skin on the arms. There wasn't skin on the face. The muscles beneath looked dark and glossy, like raw meat left out too long. Ellie made a sound that was pure animal. No words, just a strangled inhale. I backed up until my shoulders hit the door. "What the..." I started, but my mouth couldn't finish. My tongue didn't want to name it. Ellie's flashlight shook so hard the beam jittered across the body, across the blood, across the wall. Then we heard it. A scream. Not outside the building. Inside it. Somewhere down the hallway. Deeper. Like it was coming from behind walls. A woman again. The same kind of scream as before. Pain, not surprise. A long, raw sound that kept going like whoever was making it wasn't allowed to stop. Ellie clapped a hand over his mouth. I whispered, "We have to go. Now." Ellie didn't move. He was staring at the body, like his brain was still trying to turn it into something else. "Ellie!" I hissed. The scream cut off. Abrupt, like someone yanked a cord. And in the silence that followed, we heard something else. Footsteps. Not loud. Not stomping. Soft, deliberate steps in the hallway outside the office door. Ellie's eyes snapped to mine. We didn't breathe. The doorknob turned. Slow. The door didn't open, because Ellie had shut it, but the knob kept turning like whoever was outside was testing it. Then the knob stopped. A pause. And a voice, close enough that it felt like it was inside my ear, whispered through the crack. "Ellie." Ellie's face went paper white. He whispered back without thinking, "How?" I grabbed his arm so hard he flinched. "Don't," I mouthed. The voice outside shifted, like it was trying the sound again. "Ellie?" it repeated, and this time it sounded more like him. The same lazy tone he used when he said my name. Same rhythm, like a recording played back wrong. The doorknob turned again. Harder. The door rattled. Ellie panicked. He lunged for the desk drawer like he was looking for a weapon. Anything. The drawer slid open with a squeal, and in that split second of noise, the door stopped rattling. Silence. Then, a thump against the wood. Not a kick. Something heavier, like a shoulder, or a head. Ellie whispered, "We're not alone." No kidding. I found a letter opener in the drawer. Rusted, dull, barely a blade. But I took it anyway because holding something felt better than holding nothing. The door shuddered again. Another thump. Harder. A crack formed along the edge of the frame, where the wood was weak from rot. Ellie backed into the wall, eyes wide. I raised the letter opener like it mattered. The voice outside whispered again. And this time, it wasn't Ellie's voice or a woman's voice. It was wrong. Wet. Like speech made with a throat that didn't fit. "Open." The door slammed inward. The frame splintered. The lock snapped. The door flew open and bounced off the wall. And it stepped in. The skinned man wasn't a man the way you picture one. It was shaped like one, sure. 2 arms, 2 legs, head on a neck. But everything looked like it had been built out of something else. No skin, no hair, no features that made it human. Its body was glossy and dark and ridged in places, like exposed muscle and sinew stretched too tight over bone. The hands were too long, fingers ending in pale, sharp nails that looked more like hooked shards. Its face? I don't even know how to describe it without making it sound fake. It had no lips, no eyelids. Its teeth were visible all the time. Not because it was smiling, but because there was nothing to cover them. Its eyes were open, dry, fixed on us like two dead marbles set too deep. And it smelled like copper and rot, like an open wound left in the sun. Ellie made a noise and bolted. "Ellie!" I shouted, but he was already pushing past the desk, sprinting into the hallway. The thing moved so fast, my brain couldn't track it. 1 second it was in the doorway, the next it was halfway across the room, head snapping toward Ellie like it could hear his heartbeat. It lunged. I swung the letter opener without thinking, more panic than plan. The blade hit its arm and slid off with a squeal like metal on wet stone. The skinned man didn't react like it felt pain. It reacted like it noticed me. Its head turned slowly toward me. Its eyes locked on mine. And I swear, this is the part that makes me feel insane. The expression on its face didn't change, because it didn't have one. But something about the way it looked at me felt like recognition, like it was deciding what to do with me. Then it moved past me. Not around me. Past me. Close enough that its shoulder brushed mine. And it clawed my side as it went. 3 long rakes across my ribs. Through my hoodie. Through my shirt. Hot and immediate. I felt the fabric tear. I felt skin pull. I felt warmth spill. I staggered back and hit the wall hard enough to see stars. Ellie screamed from the hallway. Not a long one, a short one, cut off like someone squeezed it out of him. I shoved myself forward anyway, clutching my side. My fingers came away slick. "Ellie!" I yelled, and my voice cracked. The hallway was a tunnel of darkness and dust. Ellie's flashlight beam bounced wildly ahead, then dropped, spinning, casting crazy circles on the ceiling. I limped after it, breathing hard, pain stabbing every time my ribs moved. Around the corner, I saw them. Ellie on the floor, scrambling backwards on his hands like he couldn't get his legs under him. His phone was somewhere beside him, still recording, the screen flashing as it tried to focus. The skinned man stood over him. Ellie sobbed, I'm sorry. The skinned man reached down with one hand and grabbed Ellie by the shoulder. Not roughly, almost gently. Then it pulled. Ellie's scream turned into something I'll never forget. Not because it was loud, but because it sounded like his whole body was trying to get away from itself. I tried to move faster and almost collapsed. The skinned man's head turned toward me again, like it was checking. Then, with a quick motion that was too practiced, it yanked, and Ellie's voice cut off. The hallway went quiet, except for my own ragged breathing and the tiny clicking sound of Ellie's phone, still trying to record in the dust. I stared at the thing, and my brain refused to accept what I'd just seen. Ellie's body, slumped, limp, wrong. The skinned man lifted something in its hand. Not a weapon. A sheet. Skin. I gagged. The skinned man turned slightly, as if admiring it, then tossed it over its arm like a jacket. It took one step toward me. I snapped back into my body. I ran. I don't remember choosing direction. I just ran. down the hallway, past the lobby, out through the broken doors into the weeds, into the open air that felt like a lie, because the darkness outside wasn't safe either. My side burned. Every breath was a knife. The world narrowed to the sound of my own feet and the wet slap of blood against fabric. Behind me, I heard it. Not footsteps. A soft scraping, like nails on concrete. Then a voice, distant but clear, using Ellie's voice now, like it was a trick it wanted to show off. "Dude, wait!" I almost looked back. Almost. Instead, I ran harder, crying without meaning to, because my body had no other way to dump the fear. I crashed through the fence line where the chain had been cut. I hit the gravel service lane and kept going, stumbling, lungs on fire. My car was parked farther up by the turnoff, and I don't know how I made it there without passing out. I tore the door open, fell into the driver's seat, and locked it so hard my finger slipped off the button. Then I sat there, shaking, staring at the abandoned building through the windshield. For a long time, nothing moved. No shape in the doorway, no silhouette in the windows. Just the building, dark and empty, like it hadn't just eaten my best friend. My phone was on the passenger seat. I grabbed it with shaking hands and called 911. The call went through. A dispatcher answered. I couldn't make words at first. I just breathed into the phone like I was drowning. Then I forced it out, stuttering, messy. There's someone in there, my friend, I looked back at the building again, trying to keep my eyes on something real. And that's when I saw the face in the second floor window. Not wallpaper, not peeled paint. A face, pressed close to the glass. Smooth, featureless in the dark, except for the suggestion of eyes, the hint of teeth, the idea of a mouth that didn't need lips. It stared at me without moving. And in my head, not in the phone, not in the car, not in the air, I heard Ellie's voice, perfectly, like he was leaning in from the back seat. "Tell him to come inside." I slammed the car into drive and left so hard gravel spit out behind my tires like sparks. I didn't stop until I hit the first main road, with streetlights and other cars. I pulled into a gas station and stumbled into the bathroom, and lifted my shirt. The claw marks across my ribs were deep. Not fatal, but deep enough that the skin around them had already started to swell, angry and red. 3 long lines like a signature. I cleaned them the best I could and wrapped them in paper towels and tape, because that's what you do when you're 17 and bleeding and trying not to fall apart in front of strangers. When the cops finally found me, I told them everything. They went to the building. They found the office. They found blood. They did not find Ellie. They did not find a body. They told me maybe it was a prank gone wrong. Maybe my friend ran and I panicked. Maybe I got caught on broken glass. They said it with that careful tone adults use when they want you to feel stupid without calling you stupid. A week later, I got a message from an unknown number. No text, just a video. I didn't want to click it. I did anyway. It was shaky footage from inside that office. The one with the corkboard and the filing cabinet. Ellie's phone footage. The video froze right before the skinned man stepped into frame. Then, slowly, the camera shifted on its own, like someone picked up the phone and pointed it straight into the lens. A face filled the screen. No skin, no eyelids, teeth showing, and Ellie's voice, perfect and close, whispered, "Come back. We're not done." I should have closed the tab. I should have shut my laptop, gone to bed, and let the unease settle somewhere deep and forgotten. But, like most bad decisions, it started with a rabbit hole I wasn't supposed to find. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday. I was 6 pages deep in an obscure forum called the Hollow Index. Black background, lime green text, no ads, no mods. I wasn't even sure how I'd gotten there. The last thing I remember searching was Appalachian folklore and missing people. That's when I saw the thread. Have you seen the skinned man? No username. Just a string of numbers for a handle. Like someone punched a keyboard and hit send. I clicked. He mimics people you love. He speaks in their voices. But his eyes never blink. If you answer the door after midnight, it won't be your family standing there. The post was dated 2013. The replies were worse. Don't speak to it. That's how it learns your voice. If it takes your skin, you don't die. You just watch. He lives on the outskirts. Abandoned places. Places we forget. Some of the replies were just coordinates. One was a photo. A blurry, grayscale shot of what looked like a crawl space or well. The caption just said, "I heard her down there. But she wasn't crying. She was laughing." I wanted to believe it was all made up. A LARP thread. Some long-forgotten ARG. But then I scrolled to the last reply. "He's outside my window. He looks like my dad. But my dad died in 2004. He hasn't blinked in 30 minutes. That was posted 2 months ago. I bookmarked the page and shut my laptop, trying to shake the chill that had crawled up my neck. I figured it would disappear in the morning. Just another creepypasta I'd forget. It didn't. The next night, I heard scratching. Not like a mouse or an animal. This was slow, deliberate. It started at the back door, right near the lock, and moved in long drags towards the kitchen window. My house backs up to the woods, and I'm not exactly in a high-traffic area. The nearest neighbor is a quarter mile down the road. I waited, phone in hand, for what felt like an hour. No sound, no motion lights, just silence. I finally worked up the nerve to open the door. Nothing. No tracks, no wind, not even bugs. That's when I started checking the windows. Every night. That's when I started locking my bedroom door. A few days later, I got an email. No subject line, no address I recognized. Just a black box image embedded in the message and 2 words typed beneath it. He's listening. I opened the image. It was the same grayscale photo from the forum, the one with the well. Except now, there was something in the corner. Not clear, just the suggestion of a shape. Hunched, elongated, its face bent in a way that didn't make sense. Almost like it was trying to smile, but didn't know how. That night, I heard my mother's voice, calling from downstairs. She died in 2018. I didn't answer. I just stood at the top of the staircase, listening as she moved from room to room. The footsteps didn't sound human. Too soft, too slow, like someone was trying to mimic how people walk, but couldn't quite get it right. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Sweetheart?" she said, in a voice that was almost right. "Why are you hiding from me?" I whispered back, "You're not her." Silence. Then came the knock. 3 soft raps on the wall behind me. Except, there was no wall behind me. Just my bedroom door. Still locked. When I turned, the doorknob twitched. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I drove into town and bought some motion sensors, cameras, and every deadbolt I could get my hands on. I told myself I was just being paranoid, but I kept thinking about that thread. About how the last reply sounded like someone's final message. I tried to go back to the site. It was gone. 404. I even tried looking through cached pages and the Wayback Machine. Nothing. Like the site never existed. But the bookmark tab still showed the title. Have you seen the Skinned Man? It was around that time I started seeing him. Not clearly, not directly, but I'd catch glimpses in the trees behind my house. A tall, narrow figure that never moved right. It didn't sway like a person. It leaned, crookedly, and when it walked, it didn't bend its knees. One night, I was watching the feed from my backyard camera. I had set it up facing the woods. Nothing happened for hours. Then, without warning, the trees stopped moving. Not a single branch stirred, even though the wind was howling. That's when I saw the figure. It stepped out from behind a tree, only halfway, just enough for the camera to catch the right side of its face. No eyelid, no blink. Its skin looked like it had been stitched on, too pale, uneven. Its eye, one single milky white orb, stared at the camera for 13 minutes. Never moving, never blinking. Then the feed cut to static. When I went to check the camera the next morning, the lens had been gouged out. There were no tracks. I started digging into the coordinates I saw on the forum. Most of them led nowhere. One led to a collapsed coal mine in West Virginia. Another to a dead-end trail near an old asylum. But one of them led to a town in Pennsylvania I'd never heard of. Cinder Hollow. Population? 0. I checked satellite images. The town had been burned down in the 80s after a fire spread from a nearby landfill. A few buildings remained, but it had been abandoned ever since. Except the coordinates pointed to a house still standing. No address, no road, just a structure barely holding together, surrounded by blackened trees and half-buried fences. I couldn't explain why, but I knew that place mattered. I told myself I wasn't gonna go, but the night before I made the drive, I got another email. Same address, no subject. This one had a single image attachment. It was a photo of me, standing at my bedroom window, taken from the woods. The caption read, "You're almost ready." The drive to Cinder Hollow took 3 hours. The last stretch was all dirt road, pitted and barely passable. When I finally reached the clearing, I saw it. The house from the satellite photo. More rot than wood, sagging under its own weight. But it was still there. I parked and stepped out, every instinct in my body screaming to leave. The air smelt wrong, sweet and metallic, like rusted pennies and wet leaves. The ground was soft, spongy, almost like walking on something rotten. I approached the front door, which hung open slightly. Inside, the floorboards groaned like dying animals. The wallpaper peeled in sheets, and the air was heavy with moisture. Every step stirred up dust that smelled like something long dead. I found a staircase, and beneath it, a door. Small, cracked, leading to a cellar. My flashlight flickered as I opened it. The steps were slick with moisture. Moss crawled along the walls. And at the bottom was a well. The one from the photo. Its stones were damp, covered in handprints, red and brown and flaking. I took a step forward. That's when I heard it. My mother's voice. Then my father's. Then my own. All coming from the well. "Why did you look for me?" my voice asked. "You're not supposed to find me." The air changed. Cold, dense. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut. And then I saw him. He rose out of the darkness. Not crawling, not climbing, just emerging, like he was unfolding from the shadows themselves. The skinned man. His body was covered in patchwork skin, stitched in places, flayed in others. His limbs were too long, his fingers tapering into yellow, bony joints. His face was a mask. Too smooth, too tight, like it had been taken from a child. No eyes, no mouth, just a slit where the mouth should be. It twitched open and a wet, gasping sound filled the room. Then, it mimicked me. Not my voice, my breath, my heartbeat, my screams. I don't remember escaping. 1 second, I was in that basement, and the next, I was stumbling through the trees, my face bleeding, clothes torn. My car door was open. The engine was cold. I had no memory of the last hour, but there were handprints on my rear window. Fleshless. Raw. When I got home, I smashed my laptop, burned the paper with the coordinates, deleted everything. But I still hear him. At night, I hear voices outside my door. Sometimes it's my mother. Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's the voice of someone I haven't met yet. But the one thing they all have in common, they don't blink. I know how this sounds, but I need you to believe me. If you find that forum, if you see that thread, don't answer the door. Don't go looking. And whatever you do, don't trust the voice of someone who doesn't blink. It's been 29 days. That's how long it's been since I last heard from Drew. He was my best friend. The kind of person who sent you weird Reddit links at 3 a.m. and dared you to look them up. The kind of person who always wanted to know more, especially about things no one should. I think that's what killed him, or took him, or whatever happened in that rotted out town. He left me a voicemail, one I didn't get until it was too late. The only thing he said was, "If I stop answering, don't look for me. But if you do, don't believe anything wearing my face." That was it. I thought it was a joke. He was into all that folklore shit. Appalachian disappearances, ghost towns, cursed threads. I never thought he'd actually go to one of those places. Never thought I'd have to file a missing persons report for a guy who once made me drive 2 hours just to see a haunted gas station. But then I found his laptop. Burnt. Smashed. But not gone. Drew was paranoid, sure. But he was also obsessive. He backed up everything. Cloud, external, even a cheap SD card he duct taped to the inside of his air vent. That's where I found the backup folder. It was just called If I'm Gone. Inside were screenshots, forum threads, photos of that house in Cinder Hollow, coordinates, motion cam stills, even a blurry selfie. Drew, pale as hell, standing outside what looked like a collapsed wall. And one last file, a video, timestamped 3:09 a.m., dated the night he vanished. I shouldn't have watched it, but I did. The screen was pitch black at first, just audio, wet breathing, whispers, too many voices speaking at once, and one of them was mine. My voice, saying things I'd never said. Then, the screen flickered, and for one split second, I saw Drew's face. Or something that looked like Drew. Except it was smiling too wide, and it didn't blink. That was 3 days ago. Since then, my phone's been ringing every night. Always at the same time, 3:09 a.m. Always from a blocked number I've never picked up. But last night, It left a voicemail. It was Drew again, but it wasn't the message I heard before. It was him laughing. Long, slow, like he was trying to remember how. And then he said something else. "Come to Cinder Hollow. I'm waiting." I don't know what to do, but I keep thinking about that last line he sent me. "Don't believe anything wearing my face." And the thing that haunts me, I don't know if the voice on that message is trying to lure me there or warn me not to come. I left at midnight. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't leave a note. Just packed my truck with what I thought I'd need. My hunting rifle, the digital recorder I used back when Drew and I used to chase weird EVP hotspots, and a high-lumen flashlight with fresh batteries. I took salt, too, for some reason. I don't even know why. Maybe it made me feel like I had some kind of control. The GPS didn't register Cinder Hollow as a destination. I had to punch in the coordinates manually from the screenshot Drew left behind. The route twisted through back roads, old mining trails, and finally, nothing. The screen went dark as soon as I hit the tree line. I kept driving anyway. The trees got denser, taller, like they'd been waiting. No birds, no bugs, just that low hum you only notice when it stops. By the time I reached the clearing, my hands were shaking. And then I saw it. The house. It was worse in person. Like it had been grown instead of built. Misshapen, half swallowed by the forest. The front door hung open just like Drew described. My headlights cut across the warped boards and shattered windows, casting long shadows that didn't quite line up. I parked 50 feet back, killed the engine, and sat there in silence. My recorder was already on. Audio log, 1:14 a.m. "Okay, this is Miles. I'm at the site. Cinder Hollow. Drew, if you're hearing this somehow, I'm not leaving without answers. Just hold on." The ground squelched under my boots as I approached. The smell hit me first. Sickly sweet, like rotting fruit and old copper. The flashlight's beam jittered over the porch. Something moved. A shape. Fast, ducking behind a wall. But when I reached the threshold, nothing. Inside was exactly how Drew described it. Peeling wallpaper, sagging beams, mold climbing the staircase like fingers. But what the photos hadn't captured was the sound. It was breathing. Not mine. Not human. It came in staggered rasps, like someone inhaling through torn lungs. And it was coming from below. The cellar. My legs didn't want to move. Everything in me screamed to leave. To turn around and pretend none of this ever happened. But I couldn't. So, I descended. The stairs were slick, warped. My flashlight barely cut through the wet darkness. Moss lined the walls. But under the moss were scratches. Deep gouges, like something had tried to claw its way out. And then I saw the well. It pulsed. That's the only way I can describe it. Not physically, but in my mind, like it was drawing something out of me. Memory, fear. My thoughts began to thin. I stepped closer. Audio log, 1:29 a.m. It's here. The well. Just like in the photo. Stones look wet. Covered in handprints? Yeah. They're human. Brown, red. Some are fresh. I aimed the rifle down the well. Nothing. Then my flashlight flickered, and I heard it. Drew's voice. Miles, you came. I froze. I didn't think you would. I tried to warn you. My lips moved before I could stop them. Where are you? Silence. Then, right behind you. I spun. Nothing. But the air felt wrong. Heavy. Familiar. My flashlight flickered again. And for half a second, I saw my reflection in the well water. Except, it wasn't me. Not exactly. The thing staring back blinked too slowly, smiled too wide. Its skin twitched like it didn't fit right. And then it spoke in my voice. Why did you look for me? My recorder dropped from my hand and clattered on the stone. My breath caught. The figure in the reflection wasn't alone. Drew was there too. Or something like him. Half his face missing. Stitch marks around the jaw. One eye drooping, bloodless, and wide. His mouth moved, but the voice that came out was high-pitched, broken, like glass dragging through a throat. You weren't supposed to come. Suddenly, the cellar door above slammed shut. The flashlight died. I raised the rifle, ready to fire, but I couldn't see. I couldn't move. The air pressed against my chest, suffocating and wet. Then, the voices started again. All of them. Hundreds. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. Some were me. All whispering the same thing. Give us your skin. The chorus of voices closed in, growing louder, sharper. My fingers found the trigger and I squeezed. The rifle cracked like thunder. The flash of muzzle light lit the cellar for a split second. And in that flicker, I saw them. Figures. Crowding the walls. Hanging from the ceiling. Pressed between the stones like meat stuffed into old skin. All of them. Wearing faces. Some familiar. Some wrong. One was me. Another round. Then another. The things didn't scream. They shuddered. Like their disguises couldn't hold under the sound. One fell from the ceiling and landed in a twitching pile of flesh. I turned and ran. The stairs bent under me. The wood groaned and something grabbed at my ankle. Long, pale fingers with too many joints. I kicked free and threw myself through the cellar door. It slammed behind me. I ran without thinking. Through the hall, out the door, into the woods. Branches tore at my face. My lungs burned. The smell of rust and rot clung to my clothes. I didn't stop running until the house was a memory behind the trees. And even then, I kept going. When I finally reached my truck, the cab light was on. The door was open. And sitting in the passenger seat was my recorder. Still on. Audio log. You weren't supposed to come back, Miles. I didn't listen to the rest. I drove. Didn't care where. I just needed distance. Asphalt. Lights. People. I crossed state lines before sunrise. I've been home for 2 days now. But I don't think I left it behind. My rifle, scratched, bent. My clothes, stained in something that wasn't mud. And the recorder, I tried to play it again. It only plays one line now. Over and over. In my voice. I'm not who you think I am. I hear tapping at night. 3 soft knocks. Always on a wall that shouldn't be there. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, my face doesn't move right. Like it's remembering the shape of something else. Like it's adjusting. If you're reading this, you need to understand something. Don't look for him. Don't go searching forums. Don't follow the coordinates. Don't chase the voice of someone you loved. If they show up at your door at 3:09 a.m. with glassy eyes and a still smile, they might wear the right face. They might say the right words. But they're not them. And the moment you open the door, you've already given permission. I know how this sounds. But if I disappear, if you see a post from me after this, it's not me. Don't answer. Don't reply. And whatever you do, don't trust the voice of someone who doesn't blink. My name is Evan. I'm 26, and I drive a delivery van for a landscaping company most days. I know every back road between my town and the interstate, because I learned how to avoid the cops before I learned how to parallel park. I also know an ugly thing about small places. Rumors travel faster than police reports, and the stories people tell in grocery aisles end up as obituaries. Claire was my sister's roommate. People in our neighborhood called her Claire with an E, like it made her softer. She worked nights at the hospital, graveyard shift in records. The kind of job that lets you sleep in the day and never speak to the same person twice. She'd lived in that rental with my sister for 3 years, and knew every porch light and creak in the middle stair. She was 28 when she walked out on a Tuesday, and never came home. We called it a disappearance because that sounded less monstrous. Missing persons posters went up, the cops knocked on doors, people left casseroles on the steps. The local Facebook group lit up with threads. Someone saw a car. Someone swore Claire was on a train headed west. Then, the threads folded in on themselves, and stayed folded. The first wrongness was a smell. Not the sweet, chemical air freshener our landlord sprayed in the hallway, but a metallic tang that sat in the back of your throat, like biting down on a coin. It drifted at the edges of the day, there and gone if you walked into another room. Next came the noises. A wet scrape behind the wall. Footsteps that ended with a sound like fabric sliding over skin. Once, late in August, I woke to the neighbor's dog barking and then cutting off mid-yelp, like someone had unplugged the sound. On the porch, I found prints in the dust that stopped at the property line, as if the walker had lifted up into the air. I'd heard of the skinned man before. An internet thing. A stitched-up legend. The core was always the same. A man who removes skin and wears it like a disguise. Who walks towns in borrowed faces until someone notices the seams. Usually, it was a campfire story. Sometimes it was a grainy article buried in a county paper. I didn't take it seriously until someone in the town group posted a link to an old forum thread. Skinned man, multi-state. At first it was nonsense. Late night typing and anyone else posts. But the later pages had names, dates, and a map with pins. Someone wrote, he tries the name first. If it fits, he wears it. That was in my head the night of the first knock. A soft tap, measured, almost polite. My sister Jess pretended not to hear. Then a voice came through the door, calm and ordinary. Claire? I froze. I opened the door a crack with the chain still on. A man stood out there in a hoodie and jeans. His smile was practiced, like someone rehearsing kindness. Can I use your phone? He asked. His breath smelled faintly of copper. For a second, I almost handed him mine. Then he said Claire's name again, softer this time, and I slammed the door. The next night, he came back. He asked for water, left a rust-colored smear on the cup rim, said his name was Mark. When he turned, the porch light hit a seam along his jaw, a thin, tight line like a badly healed cut. I felt vertigo, like the ground tilted under me. On the third night, I saw him near the liquor store, talking to a woman whose brother had gone missing months before. They stood close, laughing. She touched his sleeve. When he turned his head, the skin around his eyes folded wrong, as if something underneath was moving. The same week, I found one of Claire's notebooks shoved into her jacket pocket. She'd written down sentences in her cramped hand. One entry read, "Do you mind if I use your phone?" He had my name right. It didn't show Jess. Instead, I kept scrolling down the forum. People argued about pattern and predator and myth. One post said, "If he likes your face, he won't take you. He'll wear yours instead." Another, "He prefers those who owe him." Then, another knock. Harder this time, rattling the frame. Voices layered behind it, like people speaking through gauze. Jess grabbed the bedroom door and locked it while I braced the other side. An envelope slid through the mail slot. Inside was a Polaroid of our porch, taken from the bushes, with Claire's key still on the hook by the door. I looked out the window. The man was back, hunched on the stoop with his hands in his pockets. The porch light cut across his face, showing the seam at his jaw twitching, as if something beneath was wriggling. He said my name. Evan? I didn't answer. My mouth was dry. "Who is it?" Jess whispered. "It's Mark," the man said. "From down the road. I heard about Claire. Thought maybe you'd need..." His tone was polite. Too polite. Like a script rehearsed 1,000 times. He leaned closer to the door. "You mind if I come in? It's hot." The seam at his jaw shifted. He raised a hand and touched his cheek. The skin stuck to his fingers like wet paper, peeling just enough to show a smear of raw red beneath. He smiled. I don't remember calling the police. I remember his voice as he stepped back into the dark. "You're not the first to recognize." They found him on the porch by morning. Not alive, not dead. His jacket soaked with something dark. His face peeled in strips, like a mask half removed. The report, or maybe the way people whispered about it later, used the word defaced. His prints came back empty, like he'd never been anyone at all. Claire's keys were still on the hook. Jess moved 2 towns over with her cats. She says she can't stand that doors knock at night. I drive deliveries and keep the Polaroid in my wallet. The one that shows our porch with a man who shouldn't have been there. Sometimes, when I'm idling at a stoplight, I swear I can smell copper. Sometimes, I wake with the echo of my name whispered in a voice that doesn't belong to anyone living. The forum still has the map with the red pins. People argue about whether he's a man, a myth, or something else. I don't know what he wanted. I just know the rule they all repeat. The one Claire wrote in her notebook before she vanished. He tries the name first. If it fits, he'll wear it. They always warn you not to go alone. Not just the YouTubers or Urbex Discord mods with over-engineered usernames. Even the serious threads. The ones buried deep under forum lock, in dark archive mirrors and archived way back pages, start with that same exhausted refrain. Never go solo if there's even a whisper of the skinned man. But I did. Not because I thought I was invincible. I'm not one of those guys who thinks a flashlight and a GoPro makes them immortal. I just didn't think he was real. Not really. The forums always blur the line between fact and fantasy. You'll see a missing persons report linked next to a post claiming a stairwell appeared overnight in a field. You learn to filter, to squint at the screen and separate the dead pixels from the ones that still blink. So, when I found a thread titled Buckthorn PA, Do Not Investigate, I didn't panic. I bookmarked it, and I kept reading. The original post was dated October 2008. No replies. Just a block of text. Strange formatting. All lowercase, like the author didn't want to leave a signature. They deleted it from the map. Not just signs. Grid layers. Whole topographic band's gone. But it's still there. Old roads, old houses, silos in the distance like teeth. That's where I saw him. He walked out of the corn naked and red, and the air died. Don't go. He lives in places where time rots inward. Don't go. It didn't say skinned man, but it didn't have to. I've been obsessed with the legend for years, ever since I read about the Wisconsin farmhouse where all the doors were nailed shut from the inside, or the family in Missouri whose porch camera stopped working exactly 3 minutes before they disappeared. There's always a pattern. The skinless figure, the erased town, the silence so thick it presses on your lungs. I've collected every clue, every broken link. Half of them lead nowhere. The other half don't make sense. But they all point toward places that don't like to be found. And that thread felt different. Not performative, not dressed up in spooky language. Just raw fear. I decided to go. I know how it sounds. But I didn't go in blind. I found GPS coordinates buried in the site metadata, left behind when the thread got archived. I cross-checked with historical imagery from the late 90s. There really was a buckthorn. A tight cluster of buildings. Main road, church, silos. Then, nothing. No mention in modern databases. No postal code. Just a dead zone between two stretches of old forestry road in Pennsylvania, about 90 minutes outside Harrisburg. I told people. I'm not stupid. I left a copy of the map and the coordinates with my brother. If I don't check in by Sunday, call someone, I said. I even texted the group chat. If I vanish chasing ghosts, you can say I told you so. Nobody responded. I reached the trailhead just before 2 p.m. on Saturday. It was colder than it should have been. Mid-October, but I swear it felt like November had already moved in and unpacked its things. The path started wide, overgrown but manageable. But the deeper I hiked, the less it felt like a path and more like something letting me pass. My boots stopped making a sound after a while. No birds, no wind. At one point, I heard something crunch behind me. When I turned around, there was a deer standing half in the brush. Its skin was intact, but the eyes, they weren't right. Too dark. Too knowing. It didn't run. I walked faster. It took about 40 minutes to reach what used to be buckthorn. I didn't notice the transition at first. One step, I was on dirt. The next, I was standing on cracked pavement, moss-grown and half-eaten, but unmistakably man-made. And then the town unfolded around me like a peeled scab. Rotten buildings, broken porches, shutters hanging by a single rusted hinge. No graffiti, no animals. Just stillness so thick it felt like gravity had changed. I filmed everything. Shot some establishing B-roll for a video I knew I'd never actually upload. Narrated out loud just to break the silence. October 21st, 4:12 p.m. Buckthorn, Pennsylvania. Confirmed real. Abandoned sometime in the early 2000s. Possibly tied to urban legend sightings of... I stopped talking because something moved inside the church. It wasn't dramatic, just a flicker in the broken doorway, a shadow peeling back into shadow. I didn't get a good look. I told myself it was an animal, but part of me already knew better. The church was only 100 feet away. 2 stories, steeple collapsed inward like something had fallen straight through it. The roof had mostly caved in, exposing rotten pews and mold-covered hymnals warped by water damage. I stepped inside. The silence deepened. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and forget why? This was that, but it never went away. I walked the aisle, pausing to film. I almost didn't see the hatch at the base of the altar. Square, metal, slightly ajar, and marked with chalk. Some doors opened themselves. I didn't touch it. I won't pretend I did. I'm not brave. I took 3 steps back and kept the camera on it while my chest buzzed with adrenaline. The air smelled wrong again. Rot and salt. The hairs on my arm stood up. I told myself to leave. To back out slowly, get back to the car, and come back in the morning with someone else. But something made me pause. Movement. Outside. Something ran past the front of the church. Not away from me. Toward the silos. I followed. I know. But if you'd seen it, if you'd caught even a glimpse, you would have followed too. It wasn't a person. It moved too fast, too fluid, like muscle without bone. The sun was dipping now, throwing the world into that sickly amber light where shadows lose their direction. And then I saw them. The silos. 3 of them, side by side. Towering, whitewashed structures with metal ladders spiraling like spinal cords. The middle one had a door. It wasn't ajar. It was open. I stepped closer, camera rolling. The inside was pitch black. My flashlight caught the curve of the interior, lined in something that looked like metal, but had the wrong texture. Fibrous. Red-stained. There was something on the far wall. A shape. No. A person. Standing upright. No skin. Just meat. Their heads slowly tilted. I ran. That moment, that's the one I keep reliving. Not the chase. Not the thing that followed. Not the guttural, wet sound of movement behind me as I scrambled through brush and downed logs. But the tilt. The way its head moved. Like it was confused. Like it didn't expect me to see it. Or maybe like it wanted me to. I got turned around trying to flee. I ended up in a part of the town I hadn't seen before. The houses were newer, less decay, but there were no doors. None. Just open frames, gaping blackness inside. One of the windows had fingernail marks dug into the sill. Another had something hanging from the rafters. Rope? No. Tendon. Every step I took made me feel like the streets were folding in on themselves. I passed the same street lamp 3 times. Same broken bulb. Same rust stain down the post, like a tear. And then I heard the breathing. Not my own. Low. Close. Too close. I turned and saw. It didn't move like a person. It was a person, in the roughest sense. A humanoid, hairless, no eyes, just pale, stretched tissue over where they should have been. The worst part was its mouth. Not because it was too big, but because it was stitched shut. And it was still trying to scream. Muffled, raspy gasps, like someone suffocating through gauze. I took a step forward and I bolted, cut through a thicket, ripped my arm open on barbed wire I hadn't even seen until it was too late. I ran until the trees changed, ran until my feet hit gravel, ran until I saw my Jeep and the sky broke open with the sound of wind again. I didn't sleep that night. I drove until sunrise, checked into a roadside motel and showered for nearly an hour. But that smell wouldn't leave me. That copper tang, that raw smell. I burned my clothes in a pit behind the motel. Told the clerk it was an accident. I haven't gone home. I check in every few hours. Keep moving. And here's the part I don't know how to say. Something's under my skin. I can feel it. Like a tightness. A pull. As if something small and unseen is working loose the seams of me. I see shadows that move when I don't. My reflection lags. When I blink, I sometimes hear it. A scraping sound. Like fingernails on muscle. I haven't opened my mouth in hours. Because I'm scared I'll find stitches there. I told you I wouldn't use the "he remembers you" trope. But I think buckthorn does something worse. I think it undoes you. Slowly. Quietly. Like peeling away a scab to see if the wound still weeps. So if you're reading this, don't go looking. Not for me. Not for buckthorn. Not for the skinned man. Because it's not about what you find out there. It's about what comes back with you. I do highway work. Not the glamorous kind, with orange vests and TV helicopters circling while we pour a new overpass. My company leases data from the reflector posts and mile marker cams. Those tiny solar nubs that blink at you in the dark like an insect cluster. My job is making sure they're alive and talking, swapping batteries, scraping winter salt off lenses, logging anything that looks off. It's a lot of night driving, a lot of shoulders, rumble strips, wind that smells like damp pennies. You start to notice patterns doing that. Which ramps fill fastest when a football game ends. Which rest areas always have one bathroom closed. Which motel lots are graveyards for single headlight sedans. And you notice the bulletin boards. They were what got me thinking a few months back, when the air still had that late spring bite. At a gas station in western Pennsylvania, there were 3 missing flyers with fresh staples. I pumped gas and skimmed them. One guy was a contractor, last seen near a state route. No body, no vehicle. A woman in scrubs who never made it to her night shift. a college kid whose mom wrote on the bottom in pen, "Please call your mother." 2 weeks later, I was in southern Ohio. Different interstate, different vendors, but the same faces had cousins. A delivery driver, last paying near a construction zone. A teacher who never came out of a toll plaza bathroom. New, you could tell, because paper curls a certain way when it's been rained on, and these still had fight in them. By July, my route stretched into West Virginia and Kentucky. The boards were heavier. If you stared long enough, you could play connect the dots with counties and see a slow wave of absence moving from east to west along the blue lines. None of them said foul play suspected. Not in those words. But there's a way a trooper writes, "If you have any information," that means we don't have a damn thing. Loners go missing. Drunks stumble into culverts. A lot of explanations work, even when they shouldn't. I didn't think about it more than you would, except at a truck stop outside of Huntington, where an old guy with a hard hat and a ring of nicotine on his first 2 fingers saw me replacing a reflector battery and struck up a conversation. "You keep to the center when you drive tonight," he said, like it was advice passed down from a grandfather. "Left lane, where the seams don't line up so good." I made a polite noise. "Yeah?" "Seams," he said, squinting toward the black shoulders beyond the floodlights. "Where the lanes got cut and relaid. Where the guardrail sections meet. Things that like the seams look for the slow ones on the edges. It's truer the closer you get to the state line." "Truer how?" He tapped ash into the wind. "You'll see it before you hear it. Sounds like someone rolling their knuckles down a stovepipe." He smiled in that way you don't want a stranger to smile, and went inside. He didn't come back out while I finished. I didn't make a connection until 3 nights later, because you never do until the bad things start touching the good parts of your routine. A camera near mile 118 on I-64 had been sending gibberish. I took the shoulder, hands ticking, and parked on the gravel, half in weedy asphalt where a previous patch had sunk. The night felt sullen, high overcast, a lot of light bounce from the interstate, but not a star in sight. My phone had 1 bar that flickered like a tired eye. The camera wasn't dead. It was blind. It pointed at the eastbound lanes and recorded frames that looked like someone had pressed a wet thumb into the lens and dragged. Streaks, blur. Fine, I thought. Condensation. I popped the housing, wiped. It fogged again instantly, like the lens itself was sweating from the inside. While I was sealing it, the sound came. A soft, patient rattle from the guardrail just down the slope. Rung to rung, traveling toward me. A sound like a coin rolling across ridged metal. It paused when I paused. It moved when my hands moved. "Hello?" I called. Dumb, I know. But people walk out here. People hide. There's a look some drivers get. The kind that means they've been in the cab too long with the engine humming through their bones, and now they want to talk to anyone about anything. I've heard confessions in diesel breath I wouldn't tell a priest. No answer. The rattle didn't stop. I stood still until my ears filled with blood. When I took 1 step toward the rail, it took 1 step back. Not footsteps. Not exactly. Just a shift. Like whatever balanced itself on the thin seam where one panel met the next didn't want to test my weight. The wind moved and brought me a smell I don't have a word for. Salt, sure, but not ocean. Old tape. Bandages that have been on too long. If you've ever pulled a sunburn in one piece and felt the sting where it parted, that smell. The rattle ticked 3 times and went away. I told myself raccoon. They use guardrails like highways. I finished, logged, and drove on. The coin rattle chased my car for 2 miles in fits, like a dog deciding whether to keep the game going, and then dropped away. The next week, I got assigned a cross-state sprint, hit 5 dead units between Charleston and Lexington, stop overnight at a motel with a manager who owed my boss a favor, finish up before noon. I didn't want to go back out that way. I went anyway. I needed the hours. You know those old motels with doors that face the lot, and a neon sign that worked better when cigarettes were cheap? This one had added a second story in the 90s, and then regretted it. The lobby smelled like powdered coffee and lemon cleanser. The woman at the desk gave me a key that had 23 scratched into the plastic with a knife, like she'd replaced the original and didn't care. When I asked about food, she said the machine in the laundry had microwavable burritos. She looked at my vest and said, "If you gotta leave before 4, use the side door. Front lock stick." "You get a lot of highway guys?" I asked. "People pass through," she said, and didn't mean me. The room had wallpaper that probably started life as cream and had drifted toward a color between mayonnaise and old bone. A TV that showed local news through a halo of static. When I put my bag on the bed, the mattress sighed like it had had enough of everyone. I'm not precious. I've slept on worse. I showered, propped the chair under the doorknob, and tried to convince my brain that a night with a door you can see is better than one with a hallway. I left the TV on for company. The meteorologist was smiling too wide about a cold front that was just another name for rain. Between the weather and the public interest segment about a canned food drive, there was a crawl that caught my eye. Authorities continue to search for local teacher, last seen exiting the eastbound toll plaza at... The ticker stuttered, reset, and when it reappeared, it was about a county fair. The static wasn't consistent. It blushed and faded, like the signal had to breathe. When commercials came on, the sound dipped low enough that I could hear the quieter sounds in the room. The hum of the mini fridge, a neighbor's phone alarm chirping and chirping, and a thread of noise I first mistook for water in the pipes. It wasn't. It was that rattle, softer here, coming from inside the walls. A hand traveling along a coat hanger, a spine flexing in a drawer. No, I thought. No. The walls were nothing. A metal grid, a bit of insulation, thin gypsum. Any noise from the lot would crawl through easy. But the pattern was wrong. It wasn't aimless. It traced the seams. I stood, put my palm to the joint where one strip of wallpaper met the next, and the sound came to meet it from the other side. The paper was sticky in spots, like the paste underneath had never fully set. When I leaned and looked close, I realized the pattern printed on it, stately vines and medallions, had been interrupted here and there by faint lines made with a fingernail. Straight lines, inch long, grouped in threes. Surveyor's hash marks, mile markers. The grooves darkened toward the door. At the baseboard, someone had tried to peel the wallpaper up. It had come away in a narrow tongue, then stopped, as if whoever was doing it had hit something they didn't want to see. I didn't sleep. I lay with my shoes on and watched the door, and watched the seam where the wallpaper ended at the closest door jamb. It's a stupid thing, to be afraid of the point where two things meet. But once you hear the word seam said like a warning, you can't stop seeing them. The place where the carpet edge tucks under the threshold, the slit where the mattress doesn't quite kiss the wall, the V of shadow where the bathroom tile ends and the tub begins. It makes the world look unfinished, or like it's always waiting for something to slide between the pieces. At 3:12 a.m., because my eyes were doing that thing where they skimmed the red digits every minute, the rattle intensified. It rippled along the baseboard and up the closet casing. The little door labeled linen trembled. I'd noticed it earlier and ignored it. It wasn't a door so much as a panel. One of those maintenance chases that motel builders pretend is quaint. The handle was a simple circle of metal. Cold when I touched it. I can't tell you why I did. Curiosity? Stupidity? Maybe because anything behind a door feels knowable. It opened 3 inches and coughed out air that smelled like tarps and wet wool. The rattle came from below, as if there were a vertical shaft full of hanging metal that someone was easing a hand down. I put my ear to the black gap. Bad idea, I know. The cold on my temple made my headache bloom bright. The sound was louder here, and underneath it, like a whisper pushed through teeth, I heard something say, "On the line." I shut the panel. I pushed the chair harder against the doorknob. I stared at the ceiling until the light outside the blinds turned from orange to gray. Dawn makes fools of a lot of things. The wallpaper looked like wallpaper again. The seam marks could have been anything. The TV turned itself off because the cable box had given up trying. I was gone by 6, forgetting the coffee, forgetting to tell the desk clerk that her panel had a voice. I told myself not to drive like a scared animal. Scared ones make mistakes. But the road didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a conveyor. The sound met me 3 miles west. My lane rose and fell in that shallow swell you get near bridges, and the guardrail started its song. The coin rattle, rung to rung. I moved left. It moved too. I slowed. It slowed. My phone had full bars, and I could have called someone. My boss, a trooper, anyone. But what would I say? There's a noise following my seam? When the figure stepped out, it did it without drama, which makes it worse. No lunge, no sprint, just one long step out of the place where 2 panels meet, like it had been waiting with 1 foot tucked into the crack. It put that foot onto the shoulder, then the other, and began to walk the paint line with an attention that made my mouth go dry. It wasn't tall. It wasn't short. If I had to swear, I'd say it was the exact average height of every missing person poster I'd scanned over the last 2 months. It moved like a marionette whose master was careful and precise. Its head was tilted slightly sideways, the way animals listen to underground rivers. It wore nothing I recognized as clothing, That makes it sound naked. It wasn't. It was finished. That's the wrong word, but it's the one my brain chose. Finished out, like a room with the drywall up and the corners taped. Its surface was matte and pale, tight over angles that were exactly where angles should go. Not muscle, not fat, just the suggestion of a man with all the steps between scaffolding and paint left out, and stitched where you'd expect seams, along the sides of the arms, the outer legs, the line of the jaw. Not with black thread, with something the color of old tendon. Not sloppy, not Frankenstein knots. Neat, like a tailor had worked. You want a face, I know. That's what people always ask. I wish I could give you a face, so you could say, it looked like, and slot it into your idea of how fear should be. It didn't have one. Not the way you mean. There was a place where the face should be, and it was finished like the rest of it. Smooth, pale. If it turned just so, I could see depth under there. Like fabric with a handprint pressed against it from the other side. My hazard lights ticked absurdly loud. The figure matched my speed easily without hurrying. When its foot hit the rumble strip, it shivered like a plucked string and stepped back to the smooth. It kept its attention on me. When I passed a mile marker, the number stuttered in my peripheral vision and reset in the rear view like the road was skipping frames. I don't know why I thought of the old guy and his advice. I slid farther left until my wheels kissed the dotted line. The figure leaned, considering. The center of the road has fewer seams. 18-wheelers carve it smooth with their habits. The rattle of the guardrail softened when I moved away from it. The thing kept pace for a quarter mile, then slowed, like a fisherman letting a fish run against the drag. At the next exit, the sign for a toll plaza flashed 2 miles. Those places blaze. Sodium lamps, fluorescents, all the old light that makes a night feel like a doctor's office. If you've ever felt safe in a toll plaza, it's because something in you believes monsters don't like bureaucracy. I aimed for the plaza, breathing hard, knuckles slick. Behind me, the figure came off the shoulder and began walking the narrow seam between the slow lane and the line where the asphalt met the concrete on the ramp. It ran a hand, not fingers, a hand, because the pressure was flat, like a palm, along the seam as if reading it. The sound it made was identical to my motel wall. 1,000 coat hangers singing. The closer we got to the floodwash of the plaza, the more it hesitated. The stitches along its jaw stood out. The surface of its skin rippled in faint, nauseous waves. Half the lights in the plaza were dead. They'd set up new LED housings, and the old sodium stuttered in long lines, making a shutter speed world. Every time the row over my head went dark for a heartbeat, the figure leapt closer without moving. Not with steps, with placement. My eyes tried to mark it and failed. It was simply more where it hadn't been, like it had slipped through the blink between frames. I took a lane with a human attendant. She was drinking coffee, arm out the window, nails painted a brave red. She looked at me like I'd arrived with 3 flat tires. "You okay, honey?" "There's someone," I started, and stopped, because the words had too many chances to be wrong. Do you have a door I can pull into? A bay? Light? You need a rest? She asked, slow, cautious. Behind me, the rattle rose, and the window glass beside my ear flexed. I ripped a 5 off by accident, hands shaking, and handed her 2 crumpled bills and a handful of coins, because I couldn't untangle change math in that moment. She opened her mouth to say something nice about overpaying. The floodlight over our lane blinked. I saw it there, between us. Not touching her, not touching me. In the seam where the bulletproof glass met the frame, its palm flattened, feeling for entry like a blind person learns a face. The surface of the glass clouded with its breath. Except, breath is warm, and this was cold. When the light came back, it had moved its hand to the seam where my windshield met the pillar. My own face pulsed ghostly in the glass. And for a heartbeat, there was another behind mine. Pressed up, not matching. Go, the attendant said. She didn't look at the glass. She looked at me the way you look at a dog with its hackles up. Left. There's a maintenance bay. I'll call someone. I gunned it across the lane, ignoring that my barrier arm hadn't fully lifted. It slapped the bed of my truck and cracked. The bay was a rectangle of cruelty-bright light and polished concrete floors. There were coils of hose, aluminum ladders, cabinets with stenciled words, absorbent, spill, salt. When I pulled in, the sound changed. The rattle went to a low hiss, like someone sucking a cut. I stopped and sat and listened to the world not ending for a full minute. Then 2. The attendant came around, her red nail steady on her coffee cup. You want me to call a trooper? She asked. What would I tell them? She nodded like she'd been waiting for me to ask that. You got tired on the road. Spooked yourself, she said. They'll give you a lecture and a pamphlet. In your lane, I said. The light. Been doing that, she said. We're working on it. I think it likes... I started. I didn't know how to finish the sentence without sounding like I'd soaked my brain in old wives' tales. The seams, I said finally. Where things meet. Road's nothing but seams, she said. Even the good ones. You should sit until sun's up. I sat. I sipped her coffee because she'd put it in my hand, and it made me feel less like I'd been peeled open. When day broke, the plaza looked like any other. Men in ill-fitting polos using cones like they were chess pieces, a state truck humming, a woman in an SUV yelling because coins were no longer accepted. The place where the glass met the frame in her booth had fogged and dried in long, narrow ovals, like fingerprints that had been thinking about being fingerprints and changed their mind. I finished my jobs with a nervous efficiency. At each camera box, I stood with my boots angled so the soles straddled asphalt and grass. I didn't step on drain gates. I didn't let my pants hem brush the line where tar snakes had been poured into cracks. It's hard to live like you're allergic to joins. The world is held together by them. You want to ask, did it follow me? Of course it did. Not with a car chase. Not with a movie monster sprint. In the weeks after, I'd be in my apartment and hear the heat come on, and swear, underneath the metal duct ping, there was a memory of knuckles on rails. I went to brush my teeth, and the seam where the counter met the backsplash had a blister like something was trying to breathe through latex. I had a scar on my knee from a childhood bike wreck that had been nothing to me for 20 years, and it itched deep. Not in the skin, but in the idea of skin. Like a zipper I couldn't see had twitched. I started driving different roads, state roads with more pothole than asphalt. I told myself I was saving time by avoiding tolls. I stopped staying in motels with wallpaper. I taped shut the little maintenance panel in the only one that had it, and when the clerk complained, I paid the fee and left without arguing. The billboards at gas stations still had new faces. The wave of absence had rolled further west. A man in Missouri, a girl in Illinois whose father wrote, "You can have the car, just come home." The staples glittered. There is a particular kind of hope in a staple, if you look at it right. The belief that fastening something will hold the world together. I don't have answers for you. I don't know if what I saw is the skinned man people write about when they get brave after midnight, or if that thing is just the shape fear takes on the interstate, because we've built our lives out of pieces, and we know deep down that anything made of pieces can be taken apart. I know this. When you drive at night, keep to the center if you can. If something in the corner of your eye seems to match your speed without moving, don't blink between light pools more than you have to. Don't run your fingers along the seams of things absent-mindedly. Some things learn by touch. And if you hear a rattle like a coin rolling down a metal rail, patient, steady, curious, don't go to the shoulder. Don't lean over the edge of the world we've fitted together and listen to what lives between it. It already knows your route. It's been counting the miles. It only needs you to stop. My son vanished 3 months ago. Last week, I followed his browser history to a town that doesn't show up on most maps. I didn't think I'd ever be the kind of dad who breaks into his kid's laptop, digs an old rifle out of the back of the closet, and drives into the woods after dark to walk into an abandoned town. I also didn't think my son would vanish on a normal weeknight between our house and his friends. You learn weird things about yourself when everything you thought was solid drops out from under you. The missing kids were background noise at first. Posts people shared on Facebook. A screenshot of a news article someone dropped in the group chat. Photos of smiling teenagers with the same school picture blue background, followed by paragraphs asking if anyone had seen them. Some kid from 2 towns over never made it home from football practice. A girl was found wandering on the shoulder of Highway 6, barefoot, clothes shredded, no memory of how she got there. The article said she kept asking if her real parents were still okay, and refused to look in mirrors. 2 hitchhikers stopped posting on Instagram somewhere along Route 17. Their last shot was a rusted gate next to a green mile marker sign that had been shot up so many times the numbers were hard to read. The caption was something stupid like, "If we die here, it's his fault." I'd see that stuff while waiting in the Food Lion checkout line or sitting on the toilet scrolling my phone. I'd feel that tight, mean little twist in my chest any parent gets, shake my head, and then go back to my own life. People here talked about it, of course. That's what small-town people do when something big and bad happens close enough to taste. "It's a trafficking ring. Has to be. They take the pretty ones." Nah, cult stuff. You know they've always had weirdos up by the county line. "Kids OD,
wander off. Coyotes do the rest. Nobody wants to say it.
Everyone had a theory that made it not their problem. If it was drugs, then you just had to make sure your kid didn't do drugs. If it was hitchhiking, you just had to make sure your kid didn't stick out their thumb on the highway. Simple. I listened and nodded and checked the locks a little more often. But deep down, I believed the same thing. That it was something happening to other people's kids. People who weren't careful enough. People who let their kids run wild. My son Luke didn't fit in any of those categories. That's what I told myself. He was lanky, all elbows and knees, with hair that never quite decided which direction it wanted to lay. He lived in hoodies and graphic tees. He worked weekends and a couple evenings at the Food Lion, rang up old ladies' groceries and complained about his manager on the drive home. He played games, watched streamers, rolled his eyes when I reminded him about taking the trash out. He wasn't sneaking out windows. He wasn't buying pills in parking lots. He was just normal. The night he disappeared, it was one of those damp evenings where the sky never fully commits to rain. It just hangs there and spits on everything. The stove clock said 6:34 p.m. I remember that because I was glaring at it, waiting on leftover mac and cheese to finish in the microwave, trying to decide if I was hungry or just bored. Luke walked in, already wearing his beat-up Vans. "I'm going to Dylan's," he said, opening the fridge and staring into it, like there was going to be some new food he hadn't seen the other 6 times he'd done that day. "We're going to cram for the calc test. I texted you." He had. There was going to Dylan's in a little bit, sitting between my "don't forget trash day" and his thumbs up emoji in our thread. "Take a jacket. It's gross out," I said, stabbing at the microwave button when it beeped. He made a face at me, turned, and grabbed my old army field coat off the hook by the front door instead of his flimsy zip-up. "This one's cooler," he said, shrugging it on. The sleeves almost covered his hands. It looked wrong on him. Too big, like he was trying on a costume. "That thing smells like a wet dog in a basement," I said. "You look like a raccoon that mugged a veteran." He snorted, that quick half laugh he did, and flipped me off in this lazy, half-hearted way he'd picked up lately. "Love you too. Just text me when you get there," I said, because that was the rule. "Seriously, Luke?" Yeah. He yanked the door open, hesitated for half a second like he was going to say something else, then just shook his head and left. The door shut. The house went back to the microwave hum and the kitchen clock ticking. My phone buzzed at 7:05 p.m. Made it. 2 words. No period. I remember the exact gray bubble, because it's still pinned at the top. According to Dylan's parents, he never arrived. They told the police they'd been waiting on him, that when he didn't show up by 8, they assumed he bailed or got stuck doing something at home. Dylan sent him, "Where are you?" at 7:20, and "Dude?" at 7:30. Those texts are still sitting there with "delivered" under them. Never read. By 9, I'd called Luke 5 times. Straight to voicemail. I told myself his phone had died, or he'd left it on silent somewhere. By 10, I was driving his route with my high beams on, pulling over every couple hundred yards to shine a flashlight into the ditch and tree line. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the light once and had to walk back 10 feet in the dark to find it. We called the police because, at some point, you either call or you sit there and go insane. They did what they're supposed to. A patrol car did a slow crawl along the road with its spotlight sweeping. Officers checked Dylan's place, the park, the convenience store parking lot where kids sometimes hang out. They took a missing persons report, which is one of those phrases that doesn't feel like it applies to you until it does. Detective Reynolds showed up the next day. Late 40s, softening around the middle, a tie that never quite sat straight. He had a notebook that already had lines of my life in it by the time he sat at our dining room table. "Any fights lately?" he asked. "Trouble with teachers? Girlfriends? Boyfriends? Anybody older he might be talking to online?" "No," I said. He's a good kid. He complains about homework, plays too many games, eats an entire jar of peanut butter in 3 days if I don't watch it. That's it." Reynolds nodded, like that was what everyone said. "We'll put out a notice. Check the hospitals, card activity, all that," he said. "Sometimes kids just need space. They take off for a few days. Has he ever mentioned wanting to get out? Start fresh somewhere?" "No," I said, sharper than I meant to. "He hates driving anywhere longer than half an hour. He gets carsick." Reynolds made a note anyway. They pinged his phone. The last signal put him on a half-mile stretch of county road between our subdivision and Dillon Street. Then the line just stopped. We had walked that road so many times, I could close my eyes and tell you exactly where every crack and pothole is. Neighbors, people from church, kids from his school, strangers who'd just seen the posts. Everyone came out that first weekend. They wore neon vests and carried dollar store flashlights and shouted his name into the trees like the woods were just being stubborn about giving him back. We found a torn grocery bag, 3 crushed beer cans, a dead raccoon. Someone found an iPhone in the ditch, but it was too smashed to be his. A state trooper took it anyway. By the 3rd day, the search parties were down to family and a handful of stubborn people who decided they were going to be the ones to find him. By the 7th, the casseroles on our front porch started slowing down. People still asked, but they didn't linger as long in the driveway. On day 10, Reynolds called and said, "I'm not saying this is what happened, but has Luke ever talked about being unhappy here? Like, wanting to leave?" I hung up on him the first time, called him back 5 minutes later and apologized. That night, after my sister fell asleep on the couch with the TV still on some cooking show, I went upstairs to Luke's room. His door was half open, the way he always left it when he was definitely not hiding anything. The air inside was stale. Old deodorant, sour laundry, the faint plasticky smell of electronics that had been left off for a while. His bed was a mess, blanket kicked to one side. There was a hoodie in a heap next to the laundry basket instead of in it. 2 textbooks lay open on his desk under his laptop, highlighter marks bleeding neon yellow across equations I didn't understand anymore. The laptop was closed. I stood there with my hand hovering over it, arguing with myself about privacy and trust and all that, for maybe 30 seconds. Then I opened it anyway and typed his password. Don't get smug. If you live with a teenager long enough, you're going to see them log in at least once. His desktop wallpaper was some red-black abstract thing. There were folders with names like School Crap and Music. That hurt in a weird way. It felt like walking into someone's brain and realizing you never really saw half of it. His socials were what you'd expect. Memes, homework complaints, clips from games, a couple of DM threads that were mostly, "You up?" and "Nah," and arguments about the best Souls boss. "No, I'm miserable, gonna run away" monologue. I almost shut it, thinking I'd invaded his space for nothing. Then, I opened his browser history. You learn a lot about someone when you see what they type into search bars at 2 a.m. There were YouTube videos, how to cheese boss whatever, Reddit, some math help sites, a cursed amount of DoorDash. Buried in that mess was a forum I'd never heard of. Old school looking thing, gray background, clunky layout, usernames like GutterRat13 and Bone Hotel. The thread titles were local. Stuff like, weird lights over Miller's Field, and anyone else see the guy by the quarry with no shoes? One title made my skin crawl before I even clicked it. Anyone else heard of the Skinned Man out by Cinder Hollow? The first post from Guttermouth read, "Back when my uncle was a kid, 70s, before they shut down the mines, there was this dude they used to tell stories about, out by a mining town called Cinder Hollow. They called him the Skinned Man. The story was that if you went up there at night, you'd see someone in the windows wearing your face. He collects skins, especially teenagers, because they still fit right. Whole town's abandoned now, except him and, his closet." People replied with the usual mix of bullshit and maybe not bullshit. One person, Gray Fox L, said their older brother and some kids went out there on a dare, and one came back with his arm sliced like deli meat and refused to talk about it. Just said there was something wrong with the walls. Then I saw his username. Luke, my son. He'd replied, "Cinder Hollow's real. Went past the gate last summer with Tanner. Didn't go all the way in, but close enough. Whole place smells like bad meat and wet wood. I thought it was a dead deer or something, until I saw something move in one of the doorways. Looked like a person, but skin was all shiny like raw hamburger. It waved at me. I read it 3 times. He had never said anything like that to me. No, 'Hey Dad, saw a fleshy nightmare man waving at me. How was your day?' A few posts down, he wrote again, 'He's real, or something is. We heard it talk. Sounded like flipping TV channels. Kept switching voices. At one point, it sounded like my dad yelling at me to come home. Then my mom. Then Mr. Collins. Then it sounded like me. I'm not going back. Still hear it at night sometimes.' That line, 'Still hear it at night sometimes,' hit harder than anything else. 6 months before he'd vanished, he typed that. We'd eaten dinner, watched dumb YouTube videos together, gotten into mini fights about dishes in that time. He never mentioned that he'd heard his own voice in some abandoned town miles away. Further down, a comment from him dated a couple weeks before he disappeared. 'Screw it. I'm going back when I get a car. Pretty sure there's more there. Church, basements, whatever. Half of you are lying. I want to see it for myself. I'll drop pics.' At the bottom of the thread was a link to a map site with a little red pin in the middle of nowhere. Cinder Hollow. Population 0. In another thread, someone had posted a grainy photo of a sagging Main Street, tall trees closing in. People argued about whether a pale blur in the background was a person or bad compression. One user had written, buried in a pile of jokes, 'If you hear your own voice out there, don't follow it.' Underneath, a reply from Luke, 'Too late, LOL.' I closed the laptop because my hands were shaking and I was starting to feel like I was going to throw up. If I brought this to Reynolds, I knew what would happen. He'd see, 'Screw it, I'm going back,' and call it evidence of intent. He'd see the map pin and say Luke had planned to leave, go camping, whatever. He'd latch onto that and it would become the story. Kid runs off chasing urban legend. End of thread. Nobody was going to drive 30-something miles to a condemned mining town on the say-so of a niche forum. My heart was beating so hard it made my vision pulse a little. I sat down on his bed. The mattress still held the shape of his weight in the middle. There was a faint smell of his shampoo on the pillowcase. At some point, the idea landed fully formed instead of half-formed. I wasn't showing this to anyone. I was going myself. Finding Cinder Hollow on a map is one thing. Driving there feels like choosing to walk off the end of the world. It was 37 miles, according to my phone. Route 17 up past the county line, then a right turn where there wasn't technically a road anymore. The next morning, I told my sister I needed to go for a drive. She watched me pour coffee into a travel mug and then grabbed my wrist when I reached for the fridge handle. "You're not going to do something stupid, are you?" she said. "Define stupid." I tried to joke, and it came out brittle. I can't sit here all day refreshing the same stupid news articles." "Text me when you get where you're going," she said. "Seriously, I don't care if it's just I'm alive." "I will," I said. I meant it. In the garage, I pulled down the old plastic rifle case. I'd put it behind the Christmas decorations years ago, because it felt weird having it closer. The latches were a little stiff, but it opened fine. The AR-15 inside looked the same as the last time I took it to the range with the guys from work. Slightly scratched black finish, worn spot on the stock where I always rested it on the bench. I checked the bolt, the chamber, clean, oiled. I grabbed the ammo can from the shelf, counted out rounds, filling magazines at the dinner table, while my sister pretended she couldn't see exactly what I was doing from the sink. Rifle, 3 30-round mags, 90 rounds, flashlight with fresh batteries, pocket knife, phone fully charged, one of those beat-up Aldi granola bars that had been in the pantry too long. The whole thing felt like overkill and not enough at the same time. Route 17 is one of those roads that looks the same no matter how many miles you drive. Trees, old billboards for antique malls, the occasional gas station that should probably be condemned. The sky was that flat, low gray that makes everything look like it's been put under a dirty sheet. I watched the mile markers tick by. 38, 39, 40, 41. At 42, there was a rusted gate in the tree line, just like in the hitchhiker's photo. Someone had spray painted a crooked smiley face on one of the posts years ago. Half of it had flaked off. The GPS dots on my phone lined up. I turned off the highway and bumped up the little gravel lip. The chain link gate was secured with a padlock that had been cut clean through years ago. The gate screeched when I pushed it open. The sound went out into the trees and didn't echo back from anything human. The road beyond was a pair of ruts through dirt and weeds. My truck complained with each branch that scraped the sides. I turned the headlights off halfway down, letting the dim daylight do what it could. It felt less like sneaking and more like not wanting to announce myself. It smelled different in those woods. The air was colder, even though my dashboard said it was the same 43 degrees Fahrenheit. There was a heaviness to it, like a room where someone had been smoking for years and tried to cover it up with a cheap air freshener. The trees thinned suddenly, and there it was. Cinder Hollow sat in a shallow basin between low hills, like a toy town dropped in a cereal bowl. Main Street cracked and buckled, buildings leaning in toward it like they were trying to whisper to each other. There were maybe a dozen visible structures. Brick front shops to the right, wood-sided houses to the left, a taller shape at the far end that resolved into the church when I squinted. Windows were either boarded up, broken out, or hanging in jagged shards. Trees and vines had pushed through roofs and walls. What paint remained was sun-bleached and peeling. Off to the right, I could just make out the rusted shape of old gas pumps next to the sagging Phillips 66 sign. The orange circle faded to a pale ghost. Under all of that, under the wet leaf rot and the cold air, was the meat smell. Not a whiff, a presence. Thick, sweet, sour, like walking into the back of a butcher shop on a hot day if someone had unplugged the fridge for a week. It sat at the back of my throat and made my tongue feel coated. I parked at the edge of what had once been the town limit, next to a broken wooden sign that still read, "Welcome to Cinder Hollow," in faint red letters. Someone had spray painted a crude skull over the word welcome. I turned the engine off. The world went too quiet, too fast. No birds, no wind in the trees, nothing. You don't realize how much tiny background noise there is until it all stops at once. I got out, slung the rifle over my shoulder, clipped the flashlight to my belt, and walked into town. My footsteps sounded wrong. Each one echoed more than it should have, bouncing off the hollow windows and coming back with a delay like there was someone slightly out of step behind me. At first, I tried to chalk the feeling of being watched up to adrenaline. Anyone walking into an abandoned town looking for their missing kid and a thing called the Skinned Man is gonna feel watched. But adrenaline doesn't put a fingertip right at the base of your skull and press. That's what it felt like. A small, steady pressure where my hairline ends. The tiny hairs there stood up and stayed up. It didn't fade or move. It just stayed, like whatever was watching had picked one specific spot on me to focus on. I kept flicking my eyes up to the windows, expecting to see a shape move, a curtain twitch. Nothing, just holes and shadows. On my left, an old diner leaned into the street. Chrome edging rusted through, big front window mostly gone, the few pieces still in the frame smudged brown. Inside, I could see overturned stools, a counter with a few cracked mugs still on it, a faded, "Today's Special, Meatloaf" sign hanging crookedly. On my right, a one-story building with a barely readable pharmacy sign had its door half open. The interior was pure dark, shelves collapsed into themselves. The meat smell got stronger the further into town I went. It wasn't coming from one obvious source. It was just everywhere. In the porous concrete, in the wet wood, in the dirt. There was a dark stain in the middle of the intersection where Main Street met what might have been Oak Street once. It had soaked into the cracked asphalt and dried. It could have been oil, but the color was too brown, and the streaks were leading away from it. I didn't get closer. The church sat at the far end like a broken tooth. It was stone and old brick, taller than the other buildings, with the steeple half broken. The cross was gone from the top. A twisted piece of metal on the roof might have been it. Trees crowded close, roots likely squirming right under the foundation. Luke had mentioned a church and basements in one of his posts. Of course he had. I had just shifted my weight toward it when something moved ahead of me. At first, I thought it was a person. Right height, right general shape, stepping out between two buildings into the street. My brain slotted it into man in a coat, without really looking. Then my eyes adjusted, and my brain had to reboot. The man's skin was gone. Not burned off or torn off in patches. Completely gone. The thing walking into the street was red and slick from head to toe. Muscles wrapped around bones in bundles. Tendons flexing with every Frankenstein uncertain step. You could see individual fibers twist and release. Its head was like an anatomy model when you strip the face off. Eye sockets empty, just dark holes. The jaw hung crooked. The teeth were all there, which somehow made it worse. As it walked, its feet slapped the cracked asphalt, leaving damp smears. More followed. They came out of the alley in twos and threes, then more from a side street. Some walking on two legs, some crawling. One dragged the lower half of its body behind it, spine bowing with each pull. Another moved on all fours, but with its elbows bending the wrong way. There were, I don't know, 24, 3. It felt like a lot more. They weren't quiet. "Please," one gasped, voice shredded, like a man who'd been screaming for hours. "Help me! God, please! It hurts! I can't... Where are you? Where are you? I can't see! I can't... Mom? Mom! I'm lost! I'm lost!" The voices overlapped until I couldn't tell which flayed thing was saying what. Some of them had no mouths at all, and still somehow made sound. They didn't move with purpose. They shuffled, bumped into each other, drifted like a horrible, aimless parade. I pressed myself against the brick wall of the hardware store so hard my shoulders hurt. The rifle came up on pure muscle memory, but there wasn't anything obvious to shoot at that would have made a difference. One of them had scraps of clothing still clinging to it. Half a hoodie sleeve, the waistband of jeans. On one set of shoulders, a strip of dark green fabric hung, slick with whatever covered the rest of it. There was a faint, hand-shaped discoloration on the pocket area, where something had once spilled. My old field coat has a stain like that, from an oil change I screwed up in the driveway when Luke was 7. He'd helped by dropping the cap in the pan. For a second, I thought I was going to black out. One of the flayed things turned its head toward me. Its empty eye sockets pointed straight at where I was pressed to the wall. The muscles around its jaw worked. The mouth opened wider than it should have, the flesh there cracking. Nothing came out but a low, broken moan. I didn't breathe. I don't think my heart beat. After a moment, it turned back, joining the others as they drifted down the street, past the intersection, toward the houses. Their voices, the begging, the praying, the mindless babbling, layered and faded as they went. When the last of them vanished behind a caved-in porch, I realized my fingernails had dug into the mortar between the bricks. My palms hurt. I swallowed, forced my fingers to unclench, and did the stupidest sane thing I'd ever done. I kept walking toward the church. The church doors complained when I pushed them. The left one was warped and only opened halfway before it stuck. The right swung inward reluctantly. Dust billowed up, glittering in the flashlight beam when I finally turned it on. Pews sat in crooked rows. Some split, some missing chunks. The center aisle had a path of clear floor, where recent footprints had disturbed the dust. The meat smell here was almost physical, like you could lean against it. Stained glass windows on either side were mostly broken, the remaining shards hanging like jagged teeth. Colored glass pieces littered the floor, scuffed pale by shoes. I followed the footprints. They led to the left of the altar, where a section of the wood paneling didn't match the rest. Slightly different color. Newer, cheaper wood. Someone had slapped boards over something, without bothering to make it pretty. I set the rifle against the nearest pew, within reach, and put my shoulder into the paneling. The boards groaned and flexed, nails screaming in protest, but they came away one by one. Behind them was a plain wooden door with a greened brass handle. I put my ear to it. Nothing. Just the faint drip of water and my own breathing. The handle turned. Cold, damp air exhaled from the gap. It smelled like basements and mold and something underneath that made my tongue feel thick. The flashlight beam showed a narrow wooden staircase going down. The steps darkened with age and moisture. I thought about going back to the truck right then. About driving until my gas light came on. Calling Reynolds anonymously from a payphone that probably doesn't exist anymore. And telling him there was a hole in the world under an old church, and it was eating kids. Instead, I picked the rifle back up, slung it, and went down. The stairs creaked under my weight. I spread it out, walking on the edges like that would help. Moisture beaded the walls. When my hand brushed them for balance, it came away cold and gritty. The air got cooler as I descended. The smell of mold strengthened. Underneath it, that same meat stink, heavier, older. The stairs ended in hard-packed dirt. The flashlight beam pushed out into a low, wide room. Old stone walls, heavy beams along the ceiling, some cracked. The shape of the room made me think root cellar before I saw the well in the middle of it. It was waist-high, built of stone smoothed by hands. A rotting wooden cover shoved to one side. A rusted winch stood next to it, the rope still threaded over the spindle and hanging down into the dark. The dripping sound came from there. I walked up to it, the dirt feeling a little too soft under my boots, and aimed the flashlight down. The beam went a long way, then vanished into black. Somewhere far below, something moved. A faint ripple of reflected light that might have been the water or might have been my brain making things up. "Luke," I said. Saying his name down there felt wrong, like writing it on a grave. It echoed weirdly. The walls caught it and gave it back thinner. For a second, there was only the drip. Then, "Dad?" It floated up the shaft, thin and muted, like hearing someone shout through a bad phone connection. Every muscle in my body locked. "Luke?" I leaned over the stone ring, gripping it hard enough my knuckles hurt. "Luke? Where are you? Can you move?" "I'm down here," he said. It was definitely his voice. A little hoarser, strained. "I'm stuck. I can't feel my legs. It's cold. It's so cold. Please." My brain split into two tracks. One part screamed, "This is wrong. This is bait. Nobody sounds that clear from that far down a well. This is exactly the kind of bullshit that one forum user warned about." The other part heard my kid calling for help. That part won. "I'm here," I said. "Okay? I'm here. I'm gonna get you out. Just hold on, don't move. Where are you hurt?" "Everywhere," he said. "He keeps pulling, putting things back wrong. He says he saved me for last. Dad, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." Something hit me from behind. There was no sound of footsteps, no warning, just sudden, crushing weight slamming me into the stone. My ribs met the ring of the well, and all the air shot out of me in one ugly, dry sound. The flashlight flew out of my hand, bounced across the floor, and rolled until it pointed at the far wall. I couldn't inhale. Whatever had me pinned didn't feel like hands. It was a blanket of pressure from my shoulders down to my lower back, heavy and cold and wet through my jacket. I could feel it seeping into the fabric, into the seams. Warm breath, mine, someone else's, washed over my ear. "Too late," Luke's voice whispered there. Not from the well, from right up against my head. That voice in the forum thread flashed through my mind. If you hear your own voice, don't follow it. Too late for that, too. Some half-buried part of me got angry. At him, at myself, at whatever had decided my family was toys. I clawed for the rifle. My left shoulder screamed. My fingers caught the sling, dragged it under me. I couldn't twist to aim. I could barely get the barrel pointed away from my own guts. I lined it up as best I could and squeezed the trigger. The cellar detonated with light and sound. The first flash showed the wall. The second showed something peeling itself off my back, unsticking from my jacket in a slick sheet, and skittering away like a spider made of laundry. The weight vanished. I collapsed sideways onto the dirt, coughing, vision going spotty at the edges. Dust and tiny stones rained from the ceiling. The flashlight flickered and went out. For a second, there was nothing but the ringing in my ears and the burn in my chest. Then the drip of water crept back in. I slapped the flashlight. Once, twice. It flickered, then came back on at half strength. I swung the beam around. Something was standing at the far wall. For a heartbeat, I thought it was the same thing that had just peeled off of me. Then the light caught its face, and the bottom fell out of my stomach. It was me. Same jacket, same jeans, same scuffed boots with that little crescent-shaped scratch on the left toe from when I dropped a socket wrench. Same cheap watch with a cracked face band. Same face I try not to look at too long in the mirror most mornings. Except the eyes. They had color, they had pupils, but they sat wrong. Too still, too flat, like doll eyes glued into place. And the smile? The smile pulled my own mouth into a shape I'd never seen on it. Too wide, too even. The skin around it looked stretched thin, like it was being pulled from behind. You know when you try to put a fitted sheet that's too small on a mattress, and the corners don't quite meet? It had that energy. It cocked its head to one side in a slow, jerky motion. "Don't," I said, without knowing what I was asking. "Don't," it repeated in my voice. Not the way I hear myself in my own head, the way it sounds on recordings. I heard my own weird nasal tone wrapped around that one word and wanted to crawl out of my body. I didn't think. I fired. The rifle jumped. The muzzle flash froze my stolen face in place for a split second. Bullets punched through the chest, shoulder, cheek. Fluid, too dark for blood, sprayed the wall. It didn't scream. It just glitched, like a video buffering. It took a half step back. Holes appeared in the jacket, in the body underneath. Then the skin slipped. It didn't fall off in normal patches. The whole outer layer, clothes, my face, the illusion of bone structure, slid forward like a costume being shrugged out of. Underneath was a mess. Not muscle and bone in the way you'd expect. Layers. Faces pushing out and sinking back in. Mouths wrenched sideways in what might have been a chest. Eyes embedded where no eyes should be, rolling independently. Hands pressed against the inside of it, stretching the surface like something trapped under plastic. You'd see 5 fingers splay out, then dissolve as more flesh flowed over them. "This one doesn't fit," a voice said from somewhere inside it. Not my voice, not Luke's. Something dry and crackling. "The seams are wrong," another voice answered from a different part of the mass. "He's been warned before." Then, layered over both, in my own voice, amused. "His son, though? That one was almost perfect. Barely had to adjust." I emptied the magazine into it. It didn't move like a thing being shot. It shuddered, sure, chunks blowing out here and there, but every hole I made just pulled closed again as more of it poured in. By the time I ran out of rounds, it wasn't there. Not dead, just not there, like someone had taken their hand off a projector. The only evidence it had been standing there was the spatter of that dark fluid on the far wall and a few patches on the floor. That's when the laughter started. My laughter. A short, stupid huff I'd heard in home videos and hated. It came from behind me first. Too close. Then from my left. Then from somewhere above, warped by the low ceiling. I whipped the flashlight around and finally saw what I must have been refusing to see since I walked in. The walls weren't just stone. People were in them. They jutted out at odd angles, half swallowed. A man's shoulders and head fused to the wall, his arms vanishing at the elbow. A teenage girl from the waist up, her hands frozen mid-reach. An older woman with her torso turned sideways, one breast pressed flat against the stone like someone smeared her into it. Some had skin, some didn't. Some were missing chunks, the edges smooth like someone had cut out pieces for a pattern. All of them were alive. Their chests rose and fell in shallow, fast movements. Eyes darted, rolled, fixed on me. Mouths opened and closed silently, like fish. They weren't random. Once my brain stopped screaming and started noticing, I realized their bodies followed lines. Arms and torsos and legs aligned along invisible paths that curved around the room. They weren't decoration. They were stitches. The ceiling was worse. Thin, pale membrane stretched between some of the beams, sagging. Faces bulged in that film. Just the impressions of them. Eyes, noses, lips, pressed from the other side. One pair of brown eyes near the center. I knew instantly. "Luke," I said. Those eyes blinked. A face pushed through, tearing the membrane like wet paper. It was his. Raw around the edges, skin missing on half the cheek, but undeniably his. Same slight dip in the bridge of his nose, same uneven eyebrows. His mouth worked. "Dad?" he mouthed. It sounded like air pushed through jello when it finally came out. He... The skin around him rippled. Something behind it yanked him back, like a hand grabbing the collar of a shirt. He disappeared into the ceiling again. I think I lost a few seconds there. When I came back, my knees hurt and I realized I'd sunk down without meaning to. I grabbed the nearest arm sticking out of the wall and tried to flex it, pull it free. My fingers sank in. The flesh was soft and wrong temperature. Not quite warm, not cold. Clear, jelly-like fluid leaked around my grip. The man attached to the arm screamed with his eyes. His mouth didn't move. The skin there was fused to the stone. The stone under my hand was softer than it looked. Warm. Not rock. Something pretending very hard. From somewhere up near the ceiling, my own voice said, "You're gonna ruin the stitching if you yank like that." I pointed the flashlight up, to the beams, to the faces pressed in the membrane. Dozens of eyes stared back. Some were milky, some clear, some too many. "Where are you?" I shouted. It felt useless, but it came out anyway. The laughter cut off. For a second, the only sound in the room was the drip of the well. Then, right behind my left ear, my voice whispered, "Everywhere." Something cold and slick trailed down the back of my neck, like a finger made of raw muscle. I spun and fired on instinct. The bullet shredded a section of the wall where a young woman's face stuck out. Her eyes went wide. Clear fluid sprayed. The stone around her flexed and healed over, pulling her back in, leaving a smear. "Relax," my voice said from closer to the well now, tone amused. "You're jumpy. You don't want to be jumpy. It's messy when you're jumpy." "I liked your boy," another voice said, this one sounding like someone had rubbed gravel into my vocal cords. "He came looking for me. Brought his best friend and everything. So proud of himself, like a little detective." "Brave, too," a third voice added from above my right shoulder. "Didn't stop screaming for a long time. Good lungs." "I saved his skin," my voice said, almost fondly. "You do that with the good ones. Use the cheap stuff for practice." Something peeled itself out of the far wall again. This time it built itself up as it stepped forward. Limbs extruded, feet formed, skin poured over it in waves. A face bubbled up from underneath and settled into place like a mask. Luke's face. Not the torn version from the ceiling, the one from his last school picture. Hair a little too long in the front, falling over one eye. That stupid, half-bored expression he always had when he was forced to smile for a camera. "Dad?" he said, and for a heartbeat, it sounded exactly like him. Then other voices bled in under it, until it sounded like a dozen people all saying the word through each other. I raised the rifle. "Get out," I said. "Get out of him! Get out of everyone!" The thing wearing my son's face rolled its eyes. "You keep saying him like there's a separate person in here somewhere," it said, his mouth moving in a way that didn't fit the words. "I'm hurt. I worked very hard on this one. You should be proud. He wanted to impress you." The walls trembled, bodies shuddered. A low moan rose from everywhere and nowhere. "I can give something back," it added, tipping its head. "Not the same, obviously. Once you've turned fabric into something else, you can't go all the way back. But I could let him talk to you properly. Let you hug him? For a little while. Doesn't that sound nice?" It took a step closer. The seams along its jaw twitched. Every part of me wanted to step forward and grab him and never let go. That's the worst part. Even with the walls and the ceiling and the voices, for one raw second, the dad part of my brain tried very hard to believe there was a deal here that ended with both of us walking out. The rest of me knew better. I fired. The bullet took a chunk out of Luke's forehead. For a second, the face caved in like wet clay, then filled itself back in, a different eye blinking where his should have been. "See?" the thing said, exasperated now. "Jumpy." The floor under my boots rippled. Hands grabbed at my ankles. Not human ones. Some had too many fingers, some not enough. The dirt itself puckered and flexed around my soles. I ran. I didn't think about strategy or rescuing anyone or finishing what I'd started. All that went out the window. All I had left was the animal need not to be down here anymore. The stairs were narrower than I remembered, or maybe I just wasn't seeing straight. I slammed my shoulder into the wall, hit the overhead beam hard enough to see white for a second, nearly lost the rifle when something tangled in the sling. Voices chased me up, overlapping, laughing, calling my name in my son's voice, my sister's voice, Reynolds' voice. One of them just repeated over and over, "You fit, you fit, you fit," in a sing-song. I burst back into the church, slammed the door, and dragged the closest pew across it, then another, stacking wood until the entrance was blocked. The door shook once. Just once. Then, whatever was on the other side stopped pretending to need doors. It was quiet in the church, except for my heart trying to beat its way through my ribs and the creak of old wood. My phone said I'd been down there 19 minutes. It felt like I'd lost a year. Outside, the world was dim and flat. Full dark hadn't landed yet, but whatever light the sky had left was the wrong color. The town looked worse in that in-between light. Edges blurred, the buildings leaned a little more. Shadows in doorways looked thicker. I listened for the shuffle of the skinless crowd, but heard nothing. The meat smell still hung in the air, but fainter now, like stale smoke. I didn't walk. I didn't run either. I did that fast walk you do when you're trying not to look like you're running, but your body really wants you to. My truck waited at the edge of town like something from a life I'd stepped out of. I was maybe 20 feet away when I heard him. "Dad!" Not echoing from a well, not layered with other voices. Clear, open air. The way it sounded echoing up from the basement when he was younger and wanted to show me something. "Dad, wait!" My fingers tightened on the keys. I turned. He stood in the middle of the street by the "Welcome to Cinder Hollow" sign. The hood of my field coat was up. His hands were in the pockets. Jeans, Vans, one knee rip, mud on the toes. He was backlit by the dull sky and the dark shapes of the houses. I couldn't see his face clearly. "You left me," he said. His voice cracked on left. "You heard me and you left." Something in my chest, twisted in a way I don't really have words for. It was like guilt had teeth. "Take your hood down," I said. He didn't move right away. The wind puffed his sleeves a little. "Dad, it's freezing," he said. "Can you just... I don't want to yell in the street. Please." "Take it down," I said. "Please, Luke. Just take it down." His hand came up, slow. Fingers pinched the edge of the hood. Then he smiled. I couldn't see his mouth directly, but I saw the way the fabric over his cheeks moved. Too wide, too slow. "What difference would it make?" he asked. His voice changed halfway through the sentence. Started as his, ended as mine. Other notes threaded through it. Higher, lower, like other people were trying the words on along with him. I didn't shoot. I wish I could say I did something brave or definitive there. I didn't. I got into the truck, slammed the door, locked it, and turned the engine over with hands that felt like someone else's. He didn't rush me. He just stood there, head tilted, that not smile under the hood. As I pulled away, he lifted one hand and wiggled his fingers like he was waving. The trees swallowed the town fast. Branches scraped along the sides of the truck. Once, in the mirror, I saw something pale and too tall moving between the trunks, keeping pace. When I tried to look at it directly, it was gone. At one point, my phone buzzed with a no-service message, like it was mocking me. By the time I hit the main highway again, I had bitten the inside of my cheek so hard there was blood on my tongue. I pulled into my driveway at 8:49 p.m., according to the dashboard clock. My sister opened the front door before I'd even shut the engine off. She squinted at me through the porch light. "Did it help?" she asked. "The drive?" "Well," I said, "I know where he went." It was the closest to an answer I had. That was about 3 months ago. If you ask anyone official, Luke is still missing. There are posters with his school photo on the bulletin board in the Food Lion entryway, and a faded stack of flyers on the table by the door at the police station. Detective Reynolds calls once a week and says things like, "No new updates at this time," and "We haven't given up." he still doesn't know about the forum, or Cinder Hollow, or the well. Sometimes I think about telling him everything. I'll get as far as pulling my phone out, thumb hovering over his number. Then I'll picture the look on his face when I say, "There's a thing under the abandoned church that wears people like clothes, and I shot myself down there and it laughed," and I put the phone away. Even if he believed me, and he wouldn't, because why would he? What's he gonna do? Send a couple of patrol cars and a backhoe? I'm pretty sure Cinder Hollow would eat them. So, I keep it. I go to work when I'm supposed to, or I pretend to anyway. I stand in the cereal aisle at Food Lion sometimes, and stare at the shelf where Luke used to stack the Cheerios, and my chest feels like it's full of sand. And at night, I lie in bed and wait for the house to go wrong. Because it does. That's the part that's hardest to explain without sounding like I've finally cracked. Most nights, somewhere between midnight and 3, the normal house sounds shut off. Not get quieter. Not I stop noticing them. They stop. The fridge hum dies. The little clicks from the baseboard heaters go away. Even the neighbor's stupid lab, who barks at raccoons and car doors and his own reflection, goes quiet. The silence isn't empty. It's full. Like the space in a room right after someone says something they weren't supposed to. And that's when I hear him. "Dad?" It comes from the window. Always the same one. My bedroom. Second floor. Overlooks the backyard and the sad little fire pit we never finished building. The blinds are closed. The glass is old enough to rattle in storms. "Dad? Can you let me in? It's freezing." First time it happened, I honestly thought I was dreaming. I drifted in and out of sleep a bunch that night, jerking awake every time the cellar replayed in my head like a glitchy video. Then, that voice slid in. Same tone, same little upward inflection on in. Everything inside me clenched. I didn't move. I stared at the ceiling and counted my breaths. Something brushed the siding outside, right where my headboard sits against the wall. A slow, dragging sound. Not fingernails on wood. More like someone sliding their palm along it. It left my teeth feeling fuzzy. "Dad," he said again. "Come on, it's me. You changed the locks, remember? I can't get in." That stupid argument we'd been having about him forgetting his key the month before flashed in my head so vividly I could smell the spaghetti I'd been stirring. A nail tapped the glass. Light. Then again. Then again. Not hard enough to break anything. Just patient. I thought about getting up and yanking the blinds open so hard they broke off the bracket, just to prove to myself that there was nothing there. I lay there and did nothing. After a while, the tapping stopped. The drag along the wall shifted upward, like whatever it was had climbed. There was a slow scrape across the roof above the window, then nothing. Regular house noises came back like someone had turned the world back on. Fridge, pipes, the far-off hum of a car on the main road. The next morning, I checked the siding under the window. Nothing. No scratch marks, no mud, no footprints in the damp dirt by the foundation. It happened again the next night, and the next, and the one after that. Sometimes it's just the voice and the taps. Sometimes there's a heavier thump, like something throwing its weight against the wall by the headboard. One night, something dragged across the screen with a sound that made every filling in my teeth ache. It doesn't always sound like him now. Sometimes, it's my voice, which is somehow worse. "Hey," my own voice said 2 nights ago. Conversational, like I was calling from the hallway. "Open up. You forgot I was out here." I lay there with my teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached, and watched the thin strip of light at the bottom of the blinds. "I know you can hear me," it said, the tone like I'd use if I caught him lying about where he'd been. "I heard you just fine, remember? You taught me how to talk. That's on you." I haven't opened those blinds after dark since I came back from Cinder Hollow. People love to say that if something happened to their kid, they'd do anything. They'd go anywhere, open any door, no matter how weird, if there was even a tiny chance it was them on the other side. I used to say stuff like that too. It's easy when you're not standing there with your hand on a doorknob, knowing that something wearing your kid's voice has already tried to get you to lean into a well. These days, when the house goes quiet and the voice at the window shifts from Luke's to mine and back again, saying things like, "Come on, Dad, you should see how good he looks in you," I pull the covers up, stare at the ceiling, and don't move. Because I've seen the walls under that church. I've seen the seams. And every time I hear that patient little tap on the glass, I feel the exact place on the back of my neck where something cold and wet pressed down and said, in my voice, "Everywhere."